Hello, you're watching TVP World Talks. I'm Jonasz Rewiński. On the eve of the Novi Sad disaster, which sparked massive protests all across Serbia, the European Parliament adopted a resolution condemning the use of violence and excessive force by the authorities. Of course, on the eve of the anniversary of the disaster. That's just my mistake there. Anyway, some consider the EU's renewed interest in the situation in Serbia as too little and too late, as other major powers are eyeing Aleksandar Vučić and his administration as a possible partner in their efforts to undermine democracy in the Western Balkans. So can Brussels still help turn things around? Joining us now is Ivanka Popović, former rector and ProGlas activist. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning.
So, given that the disaster in Novi Sad was almost a year ago, can you tell us how did this impact society in Serbia? Where are we at this stage with the protests still going on after so many months?
Well, I think what we're obviously witnessing a deeply divided and polarized society, one influenced by President Vučić and believing what he is presenting to the public. And on the other hand, we have a group of, or a very large segment of the population that is not accepting the reality that Mr. Vučić is presenting to us, but actually what we see around us, and that is very serious issues of systemic corruption that are affecting all walks of life. So in this respect, it's something that it's disturbing. It's also has set regular life into disarray because, among other places, this area across from the parliament of Serbia has been taken over by Mr. Vucic's followers, where it's sort of a paramilitary camp where initially there were some students that claimed to be against the protests and blockades of the university, but now it's been taken over by people who distinctly do not seem to be students, and obviously there are weapons there in that camp, and that's why we had the incident on the day when the European resolution was passed. We had an incident in this encampment where two older men, 167, 170 years old, had actually an altercation which ended with a shooting where one man was wounded, and there was a gas bomb or a gas container that was hit, which caused the fire in this encampment. And this in itself was an incident, I think, waiting to happen in this illegal settlement. But what the worst aspect of this is that President Vučić immediately blamed the protesters for being responsible for this and labeling it a terrorist act. And once again, we see the president usurping his position, because the president of the Republic of Serbia is one that does not have executive powers, but he is taking over, let's say, the position of the judiciary, of the executive, and in that respect, the tensions are rising before the commemoration on November 1st for the victims of the tragedy in Novi Sad. So I would say,
do you think the authorities are going to use this as an excuse for another clampdown on the protesters? Do you think the situation is going to get worse?
Yes, I think it's very likely. I think this incident, regardless of whether it was staged or the result of, let's say, people with weak nerves, to put it very mildly, I would say that, yes, this sets the stage, first of all, for Mr. Vučić to minimize the effect of the European resolution in the Serbian public and through Serbian media, and also to claim the degree of danger that exists by people protesting, and that gives him a free rein to use any kind of repression to stop further protests. Because in Novi Sad, on the 1st of November, very many people from all over Serbia will gather. Some of the students have started walking to toward Novi Sad from various parts of Serbia. So I see this as, yes, an option for repression to grow, even though the European Union has sent Mr. Vucic a very clear message that violence will not be tolerated. But on the other hand, Mr. Vucic's political background of a right-wing politician used to resorting to violence, I think now, as his rule is possibly coming to an end, that he is now ready to use all means to regain or to retain his power and his position. So, yes, this is a high-risk gathering that will happen on November 1st, but the violence will not come from the protesters who only want to pay their respects to the victims, but the government will solely be responsible if any incidents occur.
So you said the European Union sent Mr. Vucic a clear signal, yet before that, the EU was often criticized for not doing enough. Many people said, well, if the European Union really does care about the rule of law, they should be more proactive in essentially coercing the authorities in Belgrade to change their course. Do you think that it is actually in the best interest of Mr. Vucic not to follow these recommendations, because he knows there are competing powers in Serbia, not just the European Union, but also Russia, China. He's essentially willing to sell to the highest bidder, so to say. Do you think that this is what the situation is right now, which of course would be very much to the detriment of the protesters, because they cannot count on any sort of strong reaction from the EU in the end?
Well, I agree with you fully. Mr. Vucic will take the course of action that will maintain his position of power. So that will be his alliance to those who keep him in power. On the other hand, the European Union has been quite slow to respond to what has been happening in Serbia in the last year, which is a shame. And as you know, support for Serbia joining the European Union has slowly been decreasing because of this. And I think the European Union, if it wants to maintain its influence and also to showcase and to be very clear about how it values the principles upon which it is based, and that is basically rule of law, I think the European Union would need to show more involvement in Serbia, and this would also affect not only Serbia but the region, because this message of supporting rule of law and democratic values has somehow been missing, and Mr. Vucic has taken advantage of this reluctance of the European Union.
So what is at stake here? Because some would say, well, the European Union clearly is underestimating the Western Balkans and Serbia in particular. If it is willing to let Serbia go, to let it continue to slide back on democratic principles and to fall into the clutches of Russia and China, then perhaps the European Union doesn't understand that this is a vital part of the world where its own interests are firmly anchored.
Well, definitely the European Union should have a vested interest in the Balkans. It is somehow also part of this soft belly, so to speak, in Southeast Europe. And considering the whole global context that we have now, I think Europe would benefit from having a stable situation in the Balkans. And on the other hand, there are so many other things that are happening globally that are distracting the European Union to what seems to be not such an important part of Europe. But these things have a tendency to backlash. And unfortunately, the Balkans through history have been, even though seemingly unimportant, places that have triggered global events. And in this respect, I think the Balkans must not be disregarded. And I truly believe that it is in the best interest of the European Union to be more engaged, and it is definitely in the best interest of the population in the Balkans to have a solid and stable relationship with the European Union, because all other options are actually leading to cooperation with autocratic regimes, which would then imply that Serbia is also sort of sliding into that type of a situation of autocracy and even dictatorship.
Ivanka Popović was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm Jonasz. You're watching TVP World. Please stay with us for more latest news, updates and commentary.